Good evening and welcome to members, officers, the press and public joining the Strategic Development Committee. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so welcome also to those of us joining us on YouTube. To minimise travel and maintain social distancing, most officers, hello colleagues, do come in and join us. Most officers are joining this evening's meeting via Zoom. Can I please check that those present can hear me properly? And those people joining us online, could you just indicate that you can hear me? If you nod, that's great, thank you. My name is Councillor Rachel Tripp and I'm the Chair of the Strategic Development Committee. I'd like to ask everybody physically present to please continue to wear their face masks until they're invited to speak. And when you finish speaking, please recover your face. That's if you're able to medically wear a face mask. If you're not, then of course don't, and that's no problem. For those joining us by Zoom, please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. And for members in the room, when you are speaking, can you please speak clearly and loudly so the microphone can pick up what you say? I'm now going to ask members of the committee and officers to introduce themselves. I'd like to suggest that we use the order of membership and officers in the front page of the agenda. So I can see that Councillor Abdul Mahit is not here, neither is Councillor Beckles. So next, it goes over to my left here.
Councillor Rohit Asper, Canning Town.
Councillor Joshua Garfield from Stratford and Newtown.
Councillor Alan Griffiths from Canning Town South.
Councillor Colin Lee Parkway from Plaistow South.
Councillor Henderson Verdi from
Thank you. And moving on then to officers.
I'm Jane Custance. I'm the Director of Planning and Development.
Good evening. I'm James Bolts. I'm Senior Development Manager.
Good evening. My name is Marinda Ubi. I'm Principal Transport Planner.
Hello, I'm Amanda Campbell, Head of Planning Law.
Good evening. I'm Sanana Ramanand. I'm a Graduate Planner.
Hello, I'm Sean Scott. I'm a Principal Planner.
Thank you all very much.
Apologies, Chair. Just to note, I have another meeting that conflicts and will need to leave slightly early.
No problem. Thank you for letting us know. I can see we've also just been joined by Councillor James Beckles. I'm going to allow him a moment to settle down.
Thank you, Chair.
I'd just like to remind members that when a vote is taken, it will be by way of physically raising your hand so that we can capture this on screen. Item number 1, apologies. Have we received any apologies?
No, Chair. No apologies.
Councillor Jen Kitchen did let me know that she was going to try to join the meeting online. So perhaps if you keep an eye on the virtual waiting room. Item number 2 is minutes from our previous meeting, which was held on the 16th of December 2021. That's pages 13 to 22 of our agenda packs. Could I ask members present, please, did you have any queries, corrections, or points of clarification that came up from these minutes? Silence at this point is always encouraging. I think this is a meeting I couldn't attend, so I'm going to rely on those of you who were here. Could I therefore ask, please, you to indicate that you wish to approve these as a true record of that meeting? Approved. That's great. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is declarations of interest. Do I have any declarations, please? Councillor Singh Verdi and then Councillor Beckles.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do see that on page 22, but say the declarations of interest apply to the agenda. And I think I'll be clear that the applicant goes to the same group as myself.
Thank you. So that is for items. So I'm just checking for the minutes. Item number 8. Thank you. Councillor Beckles.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7 for the Newham College of Further Education. I'm a board member that governor at the college, so I will recuse myself from that particular decision.
Thank you. No further declarations of interest. In which case, item 4 on our agendas is determining planning applications. Members are asked to note the advice from the Head of Legal Services. Is that noted? Thank you. Announcements from the Chair is item number 5. the committee has received the following requests to address the committee. Could the speakers please identify themselves when I call out your name? Under item 6, which is Unit 3, Thames Road, I've got Nick Ray.
Good evening.
Thank you. I've got Ed Kievanar.
Hi, good evening.
Thank you. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing your name, Ed. And also Andrew Ireland from LBN.
Good evening, Chair.
Thank you. Under item 7, which is the Newham College of Further Education, I have Judith Abbott.
Good evening, Chair.
Thank you. And also Marcus Lloyd Davey. I'm guessing that Marcus is not yet on the call.
I've let him in, Chair.
Oh, okay.
Yes, he is, Chair. He's just connecting to audio. He's on
I see.
screen.
No, I am here. Sorry about that. I was having problems connecting.
All right. Thank you. Under item 8, which is 292 to 294 Plashet Grove, we have Inga Simeta Islam.
I'm here.
Thank you. Also, Alan West.
Not on the call, Chair.
Not on the call. Okay, we will see if Alan West joins us between now and this item. And also Laura Cronk. Also not on the call yet. And
Yes,
also,
Laura is on the call, Chair. Sorry to interrupt.
Hi, I'm Laura. Sorry.
Hi, Laura. I don't know if you can still hear me. I think you have a problem with your connection. I wonder whether it'd be worth trying to turn off your video to see if that helps with the sound. Could you just try saying your name again, just to see if it's any improvement?
Hi, yeah, is that any better? Yes, Laura Crunk here.
That's
5-8.
yes. Thank you.
Perfect, thanks.
And then the final speaker registered for tonight is Georgia Goff.
Good evening, Chair.
Hello, thank you. So the usual practice is to allow up to 5 minutes in total for both supporters and objectors. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Can we also agree the remainder of the order of business as outlined on the agenda? Thank you. Would members please note the officer update report, which has been circulated. In addition to the emails, there are also hard copies here on the centre of the room if you want to refer to them. Please note that the full consideration and planning assessment of matters is covered comprehensively in the committee report, which I know that we've all been through and read. I trust members have had full regard to this, and so the officer presentation will be a summary of the key issues only. So may I please call on the applicant's team for item 6 to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. So my name is Nick Ray. I'm a planning consultant from DP9 representing the applicant, R Blue Regen TR Limited. The applicant is in the process of acquiring this site from the current owners and would work in partnership with the council to deliver the development. This decision was confirmed at the council's cabinet meeting of the 2nd of November 2021. The applicant would construct the development and the council would take on a 50-year lease and manage the buildings. The purpose of this planning application is simple: to change the tenure of the 23 consented shared ownership units to discount market rent. There'd be no other changes to the approved scheme. This is to reflect the way the council intends to manage the development. In planning policy terms, discount market rent homes are an acceptable form of intermediate housing, and the variation to the Section 106 agreement that would follow a positive committee resolution this evening will secure these in line with London Plan affordability criteria. Approving this application will facilitate the delivery of 161 much needed new high quality homes for Newham, 56 of which would be genuinely affordable. If permission is granted and following prompt conclusion of the legal agreement, the applicant intends to commence work on site in April this year and estimates practically completing the scheme in April 2024. We respectfully ask you to agree with officer's recommendation to grant permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't think that we have any objectors registered for this item. The officer who's down is Rajvinder Kaur, who I understand can't join us this evening. So could I invite James Bolt to please give us the officer's report?
Thank you, Chair. I've just started to screen share, so please let me know when you can see my screen.
Yes, we can see that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Item 6 is Unit 3, Thames Road. The image on the right is the site location plan, and you can see that the site is located at the far southern tip of the borough. To the north is Thames Road. This is a Section 73 application to vary Condition 2 to include tenure plans reflecting the change of 23 homes from shared ownership to discount market rent. The original planning permission that exists for this site is for the demolition of the existing warehouse and redevelopment of the site to provide 161 units comprised over 3 residential buildings of 8, 12 and 9 stories, and that includes site access, landscaping and other associated works. The site is approximately 0.4 hectares, it's rectangular in shape and is currently occupied by a single-storey former storage building. Here you can see some aerial imagery showing the site in proximity to the Tradewinds estate, the Unix site to the east and Thames Barrier Park further west. These are some key visuals from the approved planning permission, and as you look left to right, the blocks are numbered C, B and A. And so the key planning considerations consider the principle of development, affordable housing and housing mix. Overall, the principle of providing housing on this site was established under the extant planning permission. The proposed development would continue to provide 161 homes, making a positive contribution to housing target delivery within an existing residential environment, and the principle is therefore supported. Under affordable housing, the proposals provide the same overall level of affordable housing, and it's the same tenure split. This tenure split of 35.4% with a 60-40 split in favour of social rent. The difference between the extant scheme would be the tenure of intermediate homes, 23 intermediate homes changing from discount market rent to shared ownership. The affordable units are located within Block A, that's the affordable rent units, with both the intermediate and private units located within Block C. The homes would be an equivalent affordability to the approved shared ownership homes with service charge included within the rent. And the update report that's been circulated gives the indicative housing cost comparison table, which has been provided to us. The proposals have been independently reviewed by BNP Paribas, and they have confirmed that the proposal creates a greater deficit than the extant scheme, and so wouldn't be able to provide any further additional affordable housing. The proposals in terms of affordable housing are therefore supported. Under housing mix, the 23 shared ownership units were the only units that were available to purchase under the affordable homes. The increase in rental units by 23 would take that percentage to 35.4% and is considered acceptable in the context of the scheme in the wider area. The majority of the units remain as private sale. The proposals in terms of housing mix are supported, and I'm just highlighting that on page 33 in the agenda pack, that sets out the full tenure split. 1,102 properties have been consulted, of which there was one objection which has been received and considered within the report. Should any further material representations be received that are not already considered within this report, the application will be brought back to committee. And finally, the recommendation is for the Strategic Development Committee to note the committee update and agree the reasons for approval set out in the committee report, delegate authority to the Director of Planning Development to have regard to and consider any representations received following the expiration of the consultation period on 1st of February 2022, and reporting back to committee if there are any material matters that need to be considered by the committee, and to delegate authority to grant planning permission subject to the legal agreement and conditions set out in the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just give a moment for you to remove the shared screen. Thank you. And could I ask members if they have any questions? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. First of all, I mean, of course, it's really welcome that we are building more homes in the borough. In a place like in Newham, we absolutely need more affordable housing. I just wanted to ask if the developer could tell us a little bit more about what made them want to change from shared ownership to intermediate rent. So while 70% market rate is welcome, and I'm just looking at the kind of estimated monthly cost, which is going to go down for the resident, it isn't, of course, a fair comparison because, in one case, you are able to get some ownership of percentage, and in the other, it doesn't. Given the high costs of houses, in London, shared ownership is one of the few ways in which young people and those on low income can get a foothold in the housing market. So I just wanted to know what was the kind of thinking behind it, but also, is it something that, could set a precedent that if people wanted to kind of do things like that? So to find a little bit more from the.
Thank you. Could I invite somebody from the applicant team to answer that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll field that, and thanks for the question, Councillor. And it's essentially down to the way the council, who will take on the buildings, which is to manage the development. So my understanding is that the council want to run the affordable component as a wholly rented product, but mixture of social and intermediate rent. So they don't wish to have shared ownership, owners staircasing to ownership within the scheme. They wish to take a longer term view than a typical private developer would do. So it diversifies the housing mix within the development. It's true that it introduces additional rented accommodation, but we would say that in the context of what's coming forward in the opportunity area, it's an acceptable diversification of the housing mix. There's plenty of shared ownership being brought forward in the surrounding area.
Thank you. James.
Thank you. There's a question around the rent again, and it's why didn't they go for why they have an answer, or maybe the planning officers can. Is there a possibility to go further rather than discounted rent, so the London affordable?
Apologies, I missed that question.
Well, teasing to see if the developer or officers push to go further from the discounted rent to London affordable rent.
The 34 London affordable rent units that were approved in the original scheme would remain. So the 10-year split between social rent and intermediate would be retained. The only change is to change the intermediate housing from shared ownership to discount market rent. Obviously, increasing the amount of social rent would worsen the viability even further, and we've got a viability assessment which has been verified by your officers and their consultants that says that the scheme can't support any more affordable housing. So it's just not viable to deliver any more social rent. We're committing to delivering the social rent that was originally secured in the planning permission granted last year.
Any further questions? I'll go to Alan and then Josh.
I'm sure this was answered in the previous planning permission, but I'm afraid I don't remember. I'm not going to explain where the entrances to the 3 blocks are. They appear to face a new road on the east of the site, and yet the ground floor plan on page 73 looks as if the entrances are on the west.
Thank you. I mean, just for clarity, that's obviously not material, especially to what we have before us today, but so that you can understand it, could I perhaps ask the applicant team to address this question of where the entrances to the 3 blocks are, please?
Yes, certainly, Chair. It might be easier for me to explain it if Mr. Bolt could bring up a plan, but I don't know whether there was one in his presentation. But essentially, there would be access from Thames Road, with the blocks located to the west of that, and an access road going down the eastern boundary of the site.
Sounds as if the access road on the eastern boundary answers that question that you had. Did I think that you had a question as well?
Yes, Chair, thank you. I had a question relating to the tenure split in the plans of London affordable rent and discounted market rent versus the private homes. And we have spoken at length in this committee in the past about the desire of the borough to create mixed communities. And looking at these plans, initially I considered that perhaps it was easier for Populo and then the private home provider to separate the tenures in order to ensure that delivery of services was more manageable from one organisation to the other. That can't be the case because there are some floors with discounted market rent homes isolated and surrounded by private homes. So with that in mind, what was the thinking from the applicant's perspective behind almost entirely separating the affordable rent floors and blocks and the discounted market rent floors and blocks from private homes? Has that been a conscious decision for a reason that we're unaware of? And if it could be illuminated as to why, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Councillor. The affordable homes are located in the same location as the original approval. So it's true that the block A fronting Thames Road would be entirely social rent. It's typical to do that for management reasons, and the remainder would be a mixture. Well, block C would be a mixture of intermediate and private housing, which again is typical. If anything, bringing in the discount market rent makes that easier to manage, because you can manage a block of rented accommodation better than shared ownership within that sort of context. Was that the question, the answer that you were looking for, or was it?
Forgive me, Mr. Ray, I'm not sure you've given me any additional information. I understand that it may be. Could you tell us why it's typical? What is, in a sense, easier to manage by separating people who are living in a home that is on affordable rent from those who bought their homes? What makes it easier to manage? Illuminate that for us.
Well, it just, you've got if the councillor in unified ownership of the whole scheme, it's easier to manage the tenants within the rented component rather than people who may have staircased through shared ownership. And the mix of affordable housing is the same as the approved scheme, essentially. So we're not proposing to move any units around here.
I appreciate that the mix is the same. I'm not disputing what you have already said to me. However, if the answer you just gave, it seems as though you were speaking to the council. So I wonder if an officer could confirm if that's the case. It is indeed easier, as Mr. Ray says, for the council to manage these homes if they're separated.
Thank you, Councillor.
I'll happily take that one, unless you want to, James.
After you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So we've engaged Populo throughout this development, throughout this transaction, and I think, as DP9 advised, I think being able to manage a homogenous kind of block of rented units is far easier, I think, rather than those that are kind of pepper potted between ownership and rental. They have been advising as to their strategy for the 3 different blocks and their kind of cost of undertaking that strategy. Your question around why Logistically, is it easier? I think probably because you're treating each tenant identically, and therefore, you know, you get economies of scale and, as I say, kind of standardization of management, rather than having to tailor, I guess, your kind of management strategy to different floors or different areas or different buildings. And I think that they find that easier from a kind of a holistic perspective when they're undertaking management of whole blocks.
Thank you. I know that the issue of creating mixed communities by pepper-potting tenancies as opposed to separating out different types of tenure is one that comes up both here and elsewhere. And I wonder whether perhaps I could ask the clerk of the committee to make a note of that, so we could maybe come back to this issue, perhaps in one of our members' forums, because it strikes me there's a policy issue here which isn't specific to this application and this development, but it's still something that we might want to explore a bit. Does that help at all, Josh?
I suppose so. I feel as though if Populo has, and I understand that nobody's Populo is here this evening, but if Populo has said that it creates better economies of scale and that they wish to provide a tailored experience different to that of those in the private homes provided by the private company, I would like to know what the differences are, because we've been told for years that the treatment of all resident tenancies are exactly the same, and that there is no difference in the services that those who own the homes and those who rent the homes get. And now, forgive me, Mr. Ray and Mr. Ireland have told us that they're separated so that they can be given different services. And I think you're right, Chair. This is perhaps something that can't be answered tonight, and I appreciate that.
Well, perhaps we could make a note of it and come back to it at our next development control forum, or another space where we have the chance to think about this in policy terms. Harvender.
Yes, Chair, I just want to echo what Jessica said, really, because I know it's come up many times, and we have banged on and saying that we shouldn't have this. As you said, right, it's not up to look at the policy here today, but we need to take this away to make sure that what we are saying is we actually delivering, rather than just agreeing to what comes up. But I would second what the Josh has said.
Well, I'm happy to take that as an action for me to liaise with planning policy and talk to officers and then come back. How about that?
For both of us, isn't it?
In which case, I don't believe that we have any further questions. We do.
I promise.
Sorry?
Different topic, I promise.
In which case, I will allow it.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered, I've gone through the plans and I couldn't find anything in enough detail, although if I missed it, please forgive me, on the insulation property with regards to preventing solar gain, because obviously these buildings will be so near the airport that it's unlikely in the summer that one would be willing to open one's windows because you'd be hearing the planes take off. So whereby I don't live anywhere near the airport, so I can open my windows and I have poor insulation in a 1960s Newham block, but I can open the windows. And I'm worried that people with only single aspect, and there's a couple of dual aspects, but a lot of these are single aspect homes by the airport who can't open the windows may suffer from solar gain. So I'd like to know exactly what's been done design-wise to mitigate against that and make sure people aren't going to, during the inevitably hotter summers that we keep getting, suffer from 45-degree plus temperatures in their home.
Thank you. Again, it's important, perhaps not particular to this specific application, but I will allow it nonetheless. Were there any comments on that the applicant team were able to make?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And as you point out, this isn't a change to the scheme, so the scheme remains as it was originally assessed. And I understand that all that was assessed under the original application and condition number 30, which again is recommended in the report, which talks about noise level, internal noise levels being met within the units and appropriate levels of ventilation being achieved. And that will be dealt with sort of post grant of planning permission. But Mr. Bolt may want to expand on that.
No, I don't have anything further unless you have a follow-up question, Councillor.
No, David, thank you. I appreciate the indulgence, Chair.
Thank you. In which case, I would like to ask us to move to the vote. James, is it possible to share your screen again so that we may see the recommendations, please? Thank you. The recommendations set out before us to note the committee update and for approval. Could I ask all those in favour to please raise their hands? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. That concludes item 6. I'd like to also note for the minutes that Councillor Jen Kitchen has also joined us via Zoom. So as per usual, she will be able to contribute to questions and comments, but won't be able to vote. We move on then to item 7, which is the Newham College of Further Education. Could I please ask the applicant team first, if you would like to speak for up to 5 minutes, now's your time to do so.
Good evening, Chair and members. My name is Judith Abbott and I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Newham College, speaking in favour of the proposal, which was submitted on our behalf by Cubic Consulting. I think it's a straightforward matter, but just to bring everyone up to speed, the existing windows that we have at the college are the original ones from when the college was first built in circa 1962. They're beyond economic repair, and several of them have now cracked, and they're single glazed. They have very poor thermal properties, which means that there's extreme heat loss in the winter, and in the summer the rooms are exceedingly hot. We can't, some of them don't close at all, and it creates a very adverse environment for our students to learn in and for our staff to work in. And additionally, from a sustainability perspective, clearly it's very poor, and it's contributing overall to the building having an energy performance rating of F, which is way below the average for buildings in the public realm. And also in the current climate of high utilities costs, we're looking at our utilities bills doubling unless we're able to pare them back by various means. So we're proposing to replace the windows with a design that is very similar to the existing, as close as is practical to achieve, but with better openings so that we can clean them. The new windows will be triple glazed, which will massively reduce the heat loss and just make the college a much more pleasant environment for teaching and learning and working. So those are the key points. My colleague, Marcus Lloyd-Davey, can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, the main crust of our project is to try and improve our energy efficiency, but also keep it to retain the character of the buildings. The new windows will consist of outward opening side guides and top guided windows, which will allow for easy cleaning as well. So that will actually increase that side of things. We are trying to put together an entire sort of sustainability plan in order to follow through with the Mayor's agenda for zero carbon. This forms quite a large part of it, but we are looking at other buildings as well as this. But I mean, we're hoping that you do support our application going forwards. And just to mention, we would be putting through the transport management plan before the, as requested, as part of the requirements before the project took place.
Thank you very much. We have no objectors registered to speak tonight, so I'd like to move on to the officer report from Sunyana.
Thank you, Chair. Please, can you confirm that the presentation is in full screen?
Yes, we can see that. Thank you.
Thank you. So this presentation is for item 7 for the Newham College of Further Education. The application site is Newham College's East Ham campus, which faces High Street South and is opposite the East Ham Town Hall. These images provide an aerial view of the east and west elevations of the college buildings. Here you can see the front elevations of blocks A and B of the college. And here you can see images of the rear elevations of blocks A and B. The application concerns the replacement of the existing external windows and curtain walling with new triple glazed aluminium windows and curtain walling systems to be undertaken to Block A and Block B of the college. The application site affects the setting of the Grade 2 listed Newham Council offices and the Grade 2 listed buildings, council offices, Walter East Ham Town Hall, Public Library, Police Station, Fellowship House, Technical College, Denmark Arms Public House, and the application site is adjacent to the East Ham Town Centre Conservation Area. This is the proposed front elevation of blocks A and B. And here is a slightly closer view of the proposed fenestration on the front elevations of both blocks, showing the different window types and curtain walling. And this is a graphic of the proposed triple glazed aluminium polyester powder coated window. As for the principle of development, ongoing periodic and cyclical maintenance is required for the existing windows. It would otherwise be unfeasible to retain these windows, and it would not address the poor thermal efficiency at present. Policy SC1 of the local plan encourages the retrofitting of existing buildings to improve its thermal efficiency and sustainability, which would result in reduced carbon emissions. Policy SC4 of the local plan emphasizes the impact tall buildings have on the street scene, skyline, and distant and nearby views. By including the same fenestration pattern as existing, the proposed design is not expected to negatively impact the surrounding public realm and nearby or distant views. Therefore, the principle of development is supported. Regarding design and heritage, the application site affects the setting of the heritage assets listed below on the slide. The proposed design and impact to the conservation area and nearby listed buildings has been assessed in line with national and local policy within the committee report. The development proposals are supported by the Council's urban design and conservation officers. It is considered that the proposal by way of siting, scale, and design would not have a harmful impact on the setting of the nearby listed buildings and the East Ham Town Centre Conservation Area. Therefore, the design and heritage aspects of the development are supported. Other matters include energy and sustainability. Officers are of the view that the proposed triple glazed aluminium windows and insulated curtain walling would potentially improve the thermal efficiency and in turn reduce energy demands for blocks A and B. This would be a welcome change. The proposal has also been reviewed by the Council's network management officers, who had requested for a construction logistics plan. It is recommended that this is to be secured by condition, which you can see in Appendix 1 of the committee report. LB and transportation officers have also reviewed the proposal and have stated no objection, as there will be no change in the transportation or access characteristics of the application site. They do, however, support the pre-commencement condition for the submission and approval of a detailed construction logistics plan. Given this, the proposed development is supported with respect to the matters above. Therefore, the officer recommendation. Overall, the Strategic Development Committee is asked to resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report and to delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask members whether you have any questions, please? Alan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I have another question which might not be a planning application. One might be more for the building control surveyors and the fire brigade. I'm a bit concerned about the use of aluminium, because that stuff melts at 400 centigrade, which is commonly exceeded in fires.
Thank you. Is there anybody from the applicant team or elsewhere who can comment on the safety of the new windows?
Well, spin them all into songs.
I can't say I'm an expert in this, but I've been dealing with quite a lot of correspondence about the kind of cladding that was used in Grenfell, and that's different to the kind of straight up aluminium window thing. So I think the problem with the Grenfell type cladding was the way that it was layered rather than the aluminium itself. So because this is an application for new windows, it will require not necessarily building regulations consent, but it would require sign off under the fencer regulations. So I understand the councillor's question, even though I'm not in any way an expert in it, and I hold my hands up as far as that's concerned, but I don't think aluminium windows have raised the same kind of fire considerations as cladding in itself.
I'm sure that the applicants wouldn't wish to create a fire risk. I could see Marcus, did you want to come in?
I was going to say, I mean, we're talking about cladding in with regards to windows. The windows are, of course, British standards checked and fit within all of the building regulations. And we wouldn't be putting something in that we would be considering a fire risk, because our insurers wouldn't allow us to do it anyway. So I do take your point on Vol, but you're thinking more about cladding than you are about the actual window frames themselves, because it was also a large proportion of the issue with Grenfell, for example, was what was inside the aluminium, not necessarily the aluminium itself.
Thank you, that is reassuring. Councillor Lee Parkway.
Thank you, Chair. On the same line of materials made for the windows, that being of aluminium, I have a quick question just in regards to automatic window opening in case of a fire and ventilation. There isn't much questions you can ask for this application, as it is just windows. But I just wondered, in case there was a fire, is there any type of automatic window opening? And I appreciate there may not be on the windows that are already there, but these windows you'll be providing will be a lot stronger, a lot harder to smash if needed. I just wondered if there was any type of automatic opening of windows in case of fires.
I was going to say that forms part of the college's fire strategy and would form part of its risk assessment going forwards. So I couldn't really comment at this stage, but I would look into that as part of the design process.
Thank you. And what about ventilation?
There is a separate set of work going on alongside that we're putting in additional ventilation into the building at the same time, although that doesn't form part of this application because it's not part of the planning process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any further questions from members, please? In which case, could I please ask that the recommendation for committee is placed back on the screen just for reference? Thank you. The officer recommendation to resolve to approve is before us here. Can I ask those in favour to please raise their hands? Thank you. That is also unanimous. I'm not counting, of course, James Beckles, who's declared an interest in this item. Thank you very much. That concludes item 7 and moves us on to item 8, number 292 to 294 Plashet Grove. Could I invite the applicant for this item, please, to speak for up to 5 minutes?
Chair. Good evening all. My name is Georgia Goff, a senior planner from Nexus Planning. Thank you for allowing me to speak today in support of the planning application at Plashet Grove on behalf of the applicant. The site is currently occupied by a 3-storey office building, and in September 2019, planning permission was granted at Planning Committee for the demolition of the existing office building and the construction of a 6-storey hotel comprising 85 rooms. A number of pre-commencement conditions were attached to this decision, and in 2020 and 2021, the applicant has submitted and discharged all of the pre-commencement conditions associated with this permission, except for condition 3, which is the subject of this application. Condition 3 requires the applicant to submit a demolition and construction management plan prior to commencement of works. The applicant submitted a DCMP to discharge condition 3 in 2020. However, as no contractor had been appointed, the highways and transport officers raised concerns and requested further information in order to ensure that the development had no adverse impacts on the surrounding area. The current permission expires on the 23rd of September 2022, And due to a number of factors such as the pandemic, Brexit, site constraints, and the surrounding sensitive uses, the applicant has not been able to appoint a suitable contractor and therefore has not been able to produce a satisfactory DCMP, and are concerned that they will not be able to successfully discharge this condition before the permission expires later this year. As a result, the applicant has submitted an application to vary the wording of the condition to alter the trigger, which will allow them to implement the planning permission while searching for the right contractor to undertake the works and produce a suitable DCMP that would meet the requirements of both the highways and transport officers. In order to implement the works, the applicant will dig a foundation trench that is 3 meters in length, 0.6 meters wide and 1.1 meters deep, and fill the trench with concrete. No other works other than the digging of the trench will be permitted until a suitable DCMP has been submitted and approved by the local planning authority. Consultation has been undertaken with highways and transport officers who confirm that they have no objection to the proposal, subject to confirmation of vehicle access and a marshal to be provided during the trench works, which have been outlined in the submitted cover letter. The works in order to dig the trench and minor will be undertaken by 2 builders. The process will take up to 2 days and is located on private property towards the rear of the site, so will not be visible from the public realm. Environmental Health have also been consulted and have confirmed that they have no objection to the application and requested that works are undertaken during suitable hours. Condition 18 and 20 of the planning permission were attached in order to protect neighbouring residential amenity during construction and require public footpaths to remain unobstructed and set the construction hours, which will be adhered to by the applicant whilst digging the trench. It's also important to note that the existing building is located on a majority of the proposed footprint, so no other works other than the digging of the trench could be undertaken until the varied condition is discharged. We note that concerns have been raised by residents in relation to the principle of development, but it's important to reiterate that the principle of development has been deemed acceptable by Planning Committee and it is not a consideration in the determination of this application. The applicant has every intention to commence works once a suitable contractor has been appointed and condition 3 has been successfully discharged, with Best Western Hotel set to be the occupiers of the building. Overall, the variation of the condition will not have a detrimental impact on neighbouring amenity or highways. Therefore, we consider that the application should be supported and we invite you to approve this application in line with the officer's recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we have objectors registered to speak, I'd like to invite those people to speak now. The way that the planning applications are determined requires us to give the same amount of time to the application team as we do to objectors, which means in effect that you are also allowed 5 minutes, but that is 5 minutes between you. I'll have a timer here on my desk, but I just encourage whichever of you goes first to ensure that you allow time for subsequent objectors to speak. Sometimes objectors have been in touch with each other already and have arranged an order to speak in, which we very much welcome. So if you have done that, you're of course very welcome to. So if I just reset this, and then that's 5 minutes for objectors. Please do go ahead.
I'm not sure about any other objectors, but I am representing my my neighbours in the house who has not received the letter and were not aware of the consultation. So hence I'm here to also represent them as well. Also just to mention that this is my first time participating in this hearing. So apologies if I don't follow the required structure of the objection. So I understand that the planning was already approved. So you know, as a resident whose house is in a building just in front of the planned hotel construction, I would really want to understand how it received approval after so many objections have been given to not proceed, including the school itself. And the school I'm talking about is the school next door, the planned hotel, which is girls only secondary school. And yeah, so I would like to also understand what was the consultation process applied by council, the Borough of Newham, and why not all residents were informed and received letters. So I can see many reasons why it should not be approved. Most of them have been mentioned by others who objected. Most important of them, that the hotel will be facing girls' secondary school, which raises many concerns for their safety. All that has been raised by school itself. East Ham is not a touristy location, so question would be using, a budget hotel. Who would be using a budget hotel facing girls' school? Backside of the building is already well known and regularly used place for drug dealing. This street is already not safe during night and will increase public noise levels during night, which are very high already, and neighborhood is suffering from it. Hotel would be built next to already very busy junction with many shops, mosques, temples, and large secondary school in place. This will add to already high levels of footwalk, noise, and pollution. There is literally no space to walk during busy times, and hotel construction would create road blockages and even bigger traffic jams, hence increased pollution in the area. I'm sure you know that Newham is still the most polluted area in London, and there were already cases of children dying from pollution. So my concern would be how borough administration team is tackling the problem, and I can't afford to open the windows in my flat, as both me and my children both and my child suffer from asthma. Talking about windows, the current building is standing in front of my house, which means that when hotel is built, being 6th floor, it will block all the sunlight, which is very, as you know, rare in UK. Finally, I don't understand the reasoning to approve hotel construction plans when there are so many reasons not to, and the current business there, which is shared offices, seem to be more relevant for current market with more people working from home. Not to mention the Ruskin Avenue Hotel nearby, which was recently closed due to lack of business and complaint about social disturbances coming from customers using it. All in all, I really cannot see a rational explanation for the decision made, and would really seek advice how it could be vetted. And it can, so as I can see, the hotel creating issues and safety concerns for the local community, especially girls attending the secondary school. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can, thank you. Yeah, brilliant. Just jump while the time is running. So thank you so much for all that. Yeah, just to chip in, I'm going to just read out a list of bullets in the interest of time, basically. I'm representing the Plashet Park Neighbourhood Association, and as you're all aware, there is massive local opposition to these plans, which really shouldn't be underestimated. We are completely against it. On whether they can dig a trench and fill it back up with concrete, I'd like to say that the access to the pavement would be reduced, dangerous for pushchairs and wheelchair users. Access to the mosque behind the site would be impeded. A fenced off area would become a de facto rubbish tip and site for antisocial behaviour, including drug taking and drinking, which we see in the streets around, I'm afraid, already. Access to pedestrian crossing would be reduced, which is used by the girls going to the Plashet school, including girls with visual disabilities. Construction vehicles would create noise and disruption, and there's substantial local opposition, including from our local MP and the headmistress of the girls' school, which would be the neighbour of the hotel. On the hotel development in general, I just would like to flag one point about the Chartered Association of Building Engineers says you should not build hotels next to schools. I cannot believe that this has been permitted to happen. There are vulnerable children at this school.
I'm afraid, I'm really sorry, that is just slightly over 5 minutes, but thank you for contributing. And the point that you were starting to make about the desirability of building hotels next to schools is in the papers that we've all received and have read. So it's very helpful for you to bring our attention to that point. And it's one that we have read through as we read through the papers as well, just to reassure you on that point.
But then how was it recommended for approval? I just simply don't understand.
Difficult as it is, this application today is about the condition, is about varying the condition. It's not actually about the approval. But one of the kind of mental notes I've made is it might be useful for us, with our councillor hats on, to put you in touch with your local councillors for the area who can talk you through the basis for planning applications, and in particular look at that one. But again, that's something not for tonight, that's something separately. The next bit on the agenda is the officer report. I think Sean Scott is our officer, so could I ask you to start sharing your screen, Scott?
I trust you can see my my presentation. So item 8 relates to 292 to 294 Plashet Grove, East Ham. Here is the site location. And this is a bird's eye view of the existing site and its surroundings. So as you can see, the existing vehicular crossover is to the north here, onto Plashet Grove. And the Plashet School is located to the west of the site with 2 to 4 Milton Avenue, which is 4 flats to the south, and 239 High Street North, which is now a 4-storey block of flats. And that's to the east. Here are some photographs of the site. So this is the front elevation adjoining 239 High Street. And here is a closer view of where it adjoins the school. And here is the site access. So this is a Section 73 application to vary condition free, which is a demolition and construction management plan condition, to change the wording to alter the trigger of the condition to no works shall commence to no works shall commence with the exception of digging a trench. This condition is attached to planning permission 18/01733/FUL dated the 23rd of September 2019 for the complete demolition of the existing office building and construction of a 6-storey new build hotel scheme. And this scheme comprises 85 hotel rooms with ancillary accommodation to include dining, a dining facility, bin and refuse stores, and linen storage. The proposals also include illuminated signage. So just by way of background, the extant planning permission will be referred to in this presentation as the original permission. The planning permission was granted on the 23rd of September 2019, and the scheme is set out here as read out to you before. The permission is due to lapse on the 23rd of September this year, hence the reason for this this amendment. So the reason for the new application, this minor material amendment application, is made to vary the wording of condition 3 to allow for the digging of a trench on site. The digging of a trench will allow the applicant to make a formal start on site, as there are issues at present in relation to engaging a contractor and therefore a delay undertaking the demolition and construction management plan work. So the proposed amendment would allow for the excavation of a small trench to formally make a start on site, and any further works would require the approval of details as laid out in the original permission. So following the excavation, the trench will be filled in with concrete. So here's some key imagery of the proposal. As you can see, it's kind of located within the interior of the site, and it is set away from main sort of routes around the site, around the building, existing routes, and it's not on the public footpath. So here's a closer view of that trench footing. So it's 3 meters by 0.6 meters, and here is a section of the proposed trench. So the principle of development. The hotel use has already been established, and this is due to an appeal allowed in July 2017. There's some more detail about this within the officer report. The approval of the original application was permitted in 2019, and we note Newham Local Plan Policy J1, which supports the provision of a quality hotel and visitor accommodation within the town centre, proportionate to the function and character of East Ham Major Centre. This proposal makes a minor change to the wording of condition 3 of the original permission to allow for a small trench to be built. And this allows for the formal start to be made before a DCMP is approved by the local authority. This amendment is considered to be minor and does not alter the original permission in any other way. Officers are of the view that this proposal is acceptable in principle. The impact upon amenity. Concerns have been raised in representations about the construction impacts, such as noise, disturbance and dust. Officers take the view that the works to dig the trench are of a modest scale. For that reason, the impacts are not considered to be significant, as they would not take place for a prolonged period of time. And just to clarify, though, the period of the works would be 2 days. So in summary, the proposed development with respect to the impact on amenity is supported. Transportation and travel impacts. Concerns have been raised in representations about highway safety, traffic and parking. The application documents indicate that a single van would need access to the site, and the works would need to take 2 days, which is commensurate to the works of this modest trench. And then following this, the trench will be filled in with concrete. So the applicant has also embraced the recommendations made by LBN's transportation team, which seeks to address concerns over highway safety, traffic and parking, and these are summarised within the officer report. The proposed development with respect to the transportation and travel impacts is supported. So moving on to the officer recommendation. Strategic Development Committee is asked to note the committee update and resolve to agree the reasons for approval as set out in the committee report and delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Development to grant planning permission to subject to completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990, based on the heads of terms identified at Appendix 2 of the committee report and the conditions listed in Appendix 1 of the committee report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask members, please, whether they have any questions either for applicants, objectors, or the officers? Josh, Aziz, and Rohit, Alan, and James, and Colleen.
What is the purpose of the trench?
Yeah. Would you like me to answer that, Chair?
Yes, please.
So the applicant might be able to add more to this, but the understanding is that the trench would allow a formal start on site, thus preventing the permission from running out of time in September.
Did you want to respond?
Yeah, I appreciate the answer, Sean, I truly do. However, I don't feel like it answers the question. I'm still unclear as to what this trench will be used for. And although there is some humour to the situation, I admit that, we as a committee are being asked to approve the use of resources to build something and construct something that doesn't seem to serve a purpose. Now, the use of digging vehicles that are presumably powered by petrol or diesel, and then the pouring of concrete itself as very, very highly carbon intensive material, I would never feel comfortable in doing so as a local authority that has declared a climate emergency without a declared purpose.
Could I perhaps ask the applicant to come back on exactly what purpose the trench serves?
Yeah, that's fine. So the trench is a foundation to the hotel that's going to be built, and the reason that it's the reason for the application is purely to implement the permission, so that we can get a contractor on site to do a suitable DCMP. It's a typical digging of a trench to implement the permission is quite typical. Yeah, I think, does that cover?
Do you want me to give a bit more? Do you want me to give a bit more detail on that?
Yes, please, Jane. Do go ahead.
So the way that planning permissions are normally framed is that no work should start until various conditions have been discharged. But in this case, we're coming up to the end of the sort of length of the planning permission and when it can be implemented. So then it would be lapsed. It would lapse. So back in the good old days when I used to deal with planning applications, there used to be the ability for you to make an application, for an applicant to make an application to extend the period to implement a permission, and that has in recent years, well, not even that recently, has been taken away because there's been criticism that developers sit on planning permissions and land bank them. So this is a way of actually trying to keep the permission alive by part implementing it without discharging all of the conditions that are on the original permission. Otherwise it would lapse, and then the alternative would be for the applicant to make a fresh application for the same thing again.
Is helpful, thank you. I wonder if anyone's able to address the specific point that Josh raised. Is the trench, which is dug and then filled with concrete, does that form part of the foundations for an eventual building, or is it literally just an occupation or a person or a piece of machinery which is then made good as if it was never there?
No, go on, Sean.
Chair, I've looked at the drawings and it appears that it is part of the foundations, but the applicant can.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. It's, if you look at the proposed plans, the trench is within the line of the proposed building, so it is a foundation for the proposed development.
Why not seek planning permission for the entire foundation? It's surely inefficient to construct 3-meter foundation, nothing else.
It's purely a timing point, because the DCMP needs to be submitted and discharged before any of the demolition works can be undertaken and the full foundations could be dug and built. So this is purely a timing point, so they can start on site and then produce a suitable DCMP. So that's why a full trench can't be built.
Thank you, Ms. Goff. I do have serious concerns. I feel as a committee, the planning committee, being asked to approve a loophole as opposed to approve an actual application, and that is expressing honestly my concerns over this request. And you know me, I'm never one that's quick to ever question officer recommendations, but I do have serious concerns that that's what we're being asked to do, and I'm not comfortable with that.
Officers, are you able to respond to that at all? Can you reassure us that the recommendation to approve here isn't in effect approving a loophole?
What I can say is that this is an application to consider a minor material amendment, and in my view, this is a minor material amendment. It allows them to build a small trench. It allows them to do no more than that without providing us with the relevant details that we need for their development to commence further.
I'm going to move on to the subsequent questions, but perhaps we can keep that question in mind. Forgive me, there were so many people expressing an interest earlier and we've got so into this question, I've now forgotten who expressed an interest. Can I ask you to raise your hands again, please? Alan, and then Rohit and James.
I don't think you'd call this to be the next one first time, Chair, but I'm a bit confused about the dimensions of this famous trench. I'm solely tempted to describe it as an illustration of Keynesian economics, of paying people to deal and fill them in again rather than pay them unemployment benefit, but that's not a question to the applicant or planning staff. the text talked about 3 meters in depth. And I'm looking at the map and I'm thinking that's 3 meters length because it's north and south. So I'm thinking of depth has been up and down. So how deep is this thing? How deep in terms of, it's a minor point, but I didn't try to read what was on the plan. I was confused.
So the trench itself is 3 meters in length and 0.6 meters in width. And the depth of it will be a maximum of 1.1 meters, but that'll be decided on site how deep they go, but it'll be a maximum of 1.1.
So nobody's going to fall in it and die.
Did you have a question? Thank you. James.
Thank you. Similar to our question about, I suppose, a loophole, and I wonder if officers could illuminate whether is there a minimum amount, or minimum that has to be done to avoid the lapsing of planning permission, and has this application met the minimum threshold, and if so, can there be any sort of arrangement or principles put into the heads of terms to say that we as a committee would like to see that this hotel is built within a specific time frame, because it does feel a hotel in this location. Whatever planning permissions were passed in the past might be slightly beyond the applicant to actually fulfill. And I have concerns similar to what the objectors had, that this might be somewhat a bit of it might be a bit of a red herring, and we're being suckered into making a decision about it.
I think it's quite a difficult question because there's a lot of precedent about what you need to do to implement a planning permission. So you need to make a constructive start. So in like the most minimum level of what you need to do is just like peg out the sites and not even dig anything. But the issue you've got here is you've got other conditions that are on the permission that say that no work shall start until this or that happens. So it is a bit of a sort of construct where the applicant is trying to make a constructive start without complying with other conditions on the planning permission. But as Miss Goff has explained, that this would be the partial construction of part of the foundations for the hotel. And I think we would be on a, it would be difficult for us to refuse it, to refuse the application, because what would the adverse impacts be? Because I don't think we can demonstrate that there would be an adverse impact from the construction works themselves. And also the hotel already has planning permission. So the kind of substantive questions about the development itself have already been accepted. I don't know whether James or Sean have got anything to add to that.
It is a difficult one. So, I mean, if members do want to consider a deferral, we might need to take that away and discuss that.
Could I just come in here as well, please?
Yeah, please.
So, the scenario is that this could be refused, and the applicant could submit a fresh application, and the local plan is, it's the same local plan. There's some minor changes in the London plan, but I would expect, if it was the same drawings again that we're reviewing the same scheme, that it'd be very much the same recommendation.
That is an important point, actually, and was one that I'd thought of when I was reading the papers. I did want to be sure that we weren't effectively granting a kind of an extension to a scheme which had been granted under rules that would be further improved now. And it does seem like that's, from what you said, that's not the case. A similar scheme which came under our local plan post the refresh we've had recently would be likely to be judged in the same kind of way. So it's not a kind of get out of jail free card for the developer in that respect, or at least not as I've understood it. Carleen, did you want to ask a question?
Sorry. My questions I wanted to ask have already been asked. I guess I'm really uncomfortable with this, Chair. Building the trench 1.5 metres, I think the lady said, it's hardly foundations. I don't think I could put a shed on that. So in actual fact, it doesn't sound material to this. It sounds like what we're trying to do here is safeguard an application that has lapsed due to whatever reasons, but that's not our business. Really uncomfortable with this, and I would suggest a deferment of this.
Are you proposing a deferral?
Yeah, I'm proposing a deferral.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? I'm pleased with seconders. I think, James, you did get your hand up first. I think, James.
Before we vote, could I ask a question of officers?
You can, and then I'll go to Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. In the interest of obviously any reason for deferral would need a material consideration, I wanted to ask a question about sustainability, which is a material consideration, and environmental concerns, if those were concerns that we had. Because for every application that we consider, we look at the application's merits and what it provides the community in terms of housing units, accessibility, etc., cycle parking spaces, for example, versus the carbon emissions that are produced and the materials that are used. I don't feel as though this has been done in this instance.
No.
Would officers agree with my interpretation that would be a legitimate material consideration that there is a lack of sustainability in this scheme?
I think that's a difficult one because the foundations would have to be constructed of concrete anyway. I think if we were going to defer it, then the reason ought to be to go back to the applicant to see whether they could amend the proposal so that it was actually a smaller amount of development that was there and provide a better justification about why they were actually proposing this strategy, which, as members have rightly said, is there to prolong the life of a planning permission.
Shirley, sorry, did I cut you off?
Madam Director, just raise that point. I answered Councillor Garfield. When members moved the deferral, they needed a reason. So for the report to come back another time.
Okay, is the reason which Jane has just suggested for deferral one that the proposer and seconder are happy with?
Yes. Could it be repeated again, Chair?
Sorry, Jane, would you mind repeating, please?
I can try. So I think what I'm saying is to go back to the applicant for them to demonstrate that the works that they propose as part of this amendment are the minimum that's required and that they wouldn't cause any significant adverse impacts in terms of sustainability and also amenity impacts, as the committee have said, and that they also provide further information to demonstrate why this application has come forward as a strategy to prolong the life of the planning permission.
I think that captures the concerns that have been expressed very well for me, if members are in agreement. I'd like to therefore, sorry, Rohit, did you have a question as well? I'd like to therefore ask us to vote on the proposal to defer this application, item 8, 292 to 294 Plashett Grove. Could I ask please those in favour of deferring, raise their hands. Sorry, before we vote, Harvinder.
Considering what I said earlier on about my declaration, do you think it would be safe if I didn't vote on this, or do you think that I should carry on voting? Ask Amanda this question.
Yes, we ask Amanda, please. Harvinder declared at the beginning of the meeting that the applicant for this item worships at the same Gurdwara as him.
I think Arvinder's perfectly capable of making a decision based on how he feels. So if he feels that he can make a decision with a clear mind, then yes, I'm happy for him to go ahead and vote.
Thank you, and thank you very much for checking as well. So then to come back to the request for a deferral, could I ask those who are in favour of deferring to please raise their hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favour of deferring, and against deferring, and abstentions, and 2 abstentions. So that request for deferring has passed. Harvinder.
No, that's the
Abstain.
yeah, I didn't vote. Sorry.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. It seems clear to me from the numbers that the request to defer has been passed. So we will pass that back to officers, please, and extend our thanks, of course, to those who've attended this evening to speak on this item and indeed on previous items. The only other item left on the agenda is the date of the next meeting, which is the 15th of February. So with that, I will close this meeting tonight.